you are listening to the Kinetic Man Podcast. I'm Stuart.
And I'm David, and we want to walk with you on the journey to living a life defined by uncommon action that is full of purpose, adventure, and meaningful relationships. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours, and together achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to leave the potential life behind and become kinetic men.
What's up, everybody? This is Stu, and before we start this episode, you probably know that we don't really do any type of paid-for advertising on this podcast, but I do have a request. If you have been a listener of this show for a while and you enjoy these episodes and you get value out of it, could you tell somebody else that you think would enjoy the show as well and get value out of these episodes? And maybe even do a screenshot and post an episode that you've enjoyed on your social media platform of choice and tag us. We'd greatly appreciate that. The more people know about this, the more listeners we have, the more we can continue to just provide value to you and our listeners and bring in amazing guests and just have really, really cool conversations. So thanks again. Tell somebody about the podcast. Now go enjoy the show. See you. Gentlemen, good morning. I am excited about this interview. Chad, thank you for saying yes to coming on our show. Looking forward to this conversation. David, hello. I haven't seen you in a while.
I've been floating a river the last 4 days. I'll tell you, zero cell phone reception and conversations was pretty awesome. It was pretty awesome out in the middle of the Colorado River. So it was pretty cool.
I agree. Not to hear from you for like 4 days. It's always a nice little treat to have some silence from David for just a little bit.
No, and I mean it's like and I was having this discussion with one of the dudes on the trip that they make, God made puppies and babies super cute so that we keep them and also continue to potentially have some. Well, silence from you actually keeps us business partners, and so I thank God for the time away from you and. Chad, Stu I'm super excited about this conversation as well. One, because of the academy ties, your Air Force Academy, and I got to say, go Navy. We both got our Navy action. You point at the wrong side, but we get the point.
Like opposite.
Where is it?
Wear my Navy shirt.
But Stu he's kind of the one of the two of us that really books a lot of our guests. And I think we've had like 18 Texans in a row. So I'm not sure what's going on here.
Hey,
but excited to have you.
It's God's country down here, last bastion of freedom for the U.S. And guys, I'm honored to be on here because I feel the love between you two. I love the banter back and forth, man. Men being men, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Chad, being here in Denver, my son was born here, so he's kind of become a Denver Broncos fan. But I still I'm trying to push him to get to be all in on Cowboys. I've been a Cowboys fan my entire life, and I took him to Broncos training camp, and I almost had him wear his Cowboys jersey, but that probably was a little bit too far to go. But I'm excited about this conversation. I was telling my brother-in-law who lives in Richardson that we were having you on, and he was super excited to listen in once this goes live. So, Chad, if you could, man, for our listeners, give us a little bit of background about who you are and what you do.
All right, I'll give the Reader's Digest condensed version. I'm a farm boy from Iowa. Grew up on a family farm that has been in our family since the 1850s. So, I grew up working alongside my brother, my grandfather, my dad. Awesome, middle America work ethic, great American work ethic background. From there, had some success in high school, athletic-wise, had good grades, went to the #1 service academy in the country, Air Force Academy, to play football. That's, you guys, David, I know you played ball at the Naval Academy, but, it was one of those things why I went to the Air Force Academy was, one, I wanted a collegiate experience, unlike my peers going to your traditional schools. So I wanted that military challenge. I wanted that academic challenge. And I wanted to go to, a program that was up and coming, and Air Force football was really up and coming. We really got into our stride there in the mid, to late 80s. From there, was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys prior to graduating from the Air Force Academy. So as I had a little bit of a conundrum, do I try to go play football, or do I fulfill my commitment and to be the man of character that I profess to be and that I choose to be, fulfill my commitment? So technically, playing in the NFL was never really going to be an option for me because I chose to up my commitment from 5 years to 8 years because I wanted to fly jets. So I went and flew God's gift to close air support, the mighty A10 Warthog, because it was probably the only jet that I could fit into. Um, Spent 4 years doing that, flew 45 missions in northern Iraq in support of Operation Provide Comfort, Northern Watch, right after the first, during and after the first Gulf War. Then our armed forces went through reduction in force, where they were waiving commitment times. So they waived, our pilot training commitment. Not enough individuals were getting out, so then they waived 2 years off of our service academy commitment, which then allowed me to kind of raise my hand and say, I can go do something else here, go play for the Cowboys. So, guys, my true claim to fame is I flew my last mission in northern Iraq in February of '92, and I played the Super Bowl the same year. That's how fast life changed for me. From there, played 9 years with the Cowboys. We very fortunate to win 3 Super Bowls during that time. I realized soon for business what I was going to do when I finally grew up. Once a Cowboy, always a Cowboy. So I stayed in the Dallas area, love Texas. My kids have all been, born and raised here in Texas. And I've been, have a commercial real estate company the last 13 years called Rubicon Representation. And, we're currently riding out this time of economic uncertainty and get up every day and just take one step forward. That's my life. Oh, and the most important thing, married Tammy for 34 years, and I have 2 children, Chase and Brennan. I just became a grandpa 5 months ago. So that's
Nice.
the main
That's
thing.
awesome. That's 34 years.
That's awesome.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Well, congrats on one of the things that I have absolutely cherished about getting out of the Navy is we're close to my parents. They're out here in Colorado, and seeing the relationship, not something I grew up with, seeing the relationship between my children and my parents is such a beautiful thing. It's such a different dynamic. And it's fascinating to me because I think my parents collectively have just forgotten that I exist or that those children came from myself and my wife, and they just don't even they don't even say hi to us anymore. They're like, boom, right to the grandkids. And I'm just like, oh, okay, this is how it goes. But have loved that dynamic and the intentionality of that relationship, I think is such a beautiful thing. So congratulations on that as well.
Yeah, I was very blessed to grow up, in a farming community where I was around all my aunts, uncles, all my grandparents, great grandparents. The nuclear family was very broad and diverse, and for me, I thought I loved my kids. I mean, I thought I loved my kids. I didn't think I could love
That's
any people more than I loved my children. But when my
100%.
son Rowan came to this world and I got to hold him for the first time, man, it took it to a whole new level, brother. And I get it.
I love
I
that.
love my daughter, but hey, it's all about my grandson now.
I love it. That's the best part too. Like when parents are trying to explain to their kids how much they love them, but there's a big but there, right? Like, but the grandkids, you're like, I got it. I got it. I'm looking forward to it. That's awesome. Hey, I want to touch on, I've heard some podcasts you've been on and just, the messages that you've put out. And one of the things that struck me as Stu and I transitioned out of the military, we're 20 years military guys. We had the podcast been going since 2018. We were, whatever that was, 4 years before we retired. We started the podcast. We started a couple real estate businesses, like all with the intent of the transition from the military and being prepared for that. And we both, at least I don't want to speak for Stu, but I was shocked at the amount of identity. For me, it's always been I love Jesus first, I love my family, and then we have these other things going on, right? And I love my country and all these things, but those are distant. That was a distant third to the first two that I professed and that I claimed. But I was shocked when I got out. I had a significant identity um, transition that I did not anticipate because I thought the other two, I was so firm in those two that I was like, I'm good. I'm good. And plus, Stu and I have some businesses and we're good to go. I got all the blocks checked. And that was not the case. What struck me about you and your story, you've literally had careers that are identity, like defining, identity stealing sometimes things. A fighter pilot, A10 Warthog, which I agree, my kid is big into aircraft, and I'm like, dude, if you go fly the Warthog, if that's a possibility, I'll forgive all the other Air Force stuff. Like that's fine. That's a super cool aircraft. But coming out of that is huge identity. And then you go into something like the NFL, and not only the NFL, but the Cowboys, which kind of gross, but that's fine. We love it. God bless you. But that's like such an identity. And then to stack on top of that, you're a Super Bowl, three-time Super Bowl champion, NFL Dallas Cowboy, right? Like these things are such deeply ingrained identities. And I was just struck by, I was like, man, I wonder how the transition for him through each of those was, because it had to have been challenging. And I'm just curious how you navigated that, and how, a lot of our listeners are military guys. What advice could you give them as they transition through these phases of life? Some of these extremely, we got a bunch of Navy SEALs in our network, and man, talk about identity. Like it is just, it's everything, right? But it can't be everything.
Yeah, amen. I'll kind of start with the ending, then I'll work back towards the beginning. I mentor individuals that are separating from the military and or professional athletics. And I'll just ask them a simple question. Who are you? Who are you? And when I get back, whether, I'm ensign so-and-so, I'm chief petty officer so-and-so, I'm lieutenant so-and-so, I'm chief master sergeant so-and-so, former F-16 fighter pilot, you name it, or I'm Joe Blow or John Smith, running back for whoever. I go, no, man, that's what you do. What you do does not define who you are. Who are you? And this is something that I'll say, okay, go back and kind of think about that one for a while. Who are you? And I say that is because, military guys, as you guys know, there's so many, when you separate from something, and for this generation coming up, Gen Z and millennials and this next alpha generation, studies have shown that they're going to change not just within their career field, but they're going to change career paths up to 10, 11, 12 times during their work life. So if they define who they are by what they do, and they're going to be schizophrenic by the time it's all said and done. So for me, I had to learn kind of the hard way with that, making the transition from flying jets to playing the NFL. Actually, that was an easy one because you're working with a bunch of alpha males. You're working with guys that are high achievers that are at the top of their game. You have a common focus, common mission, common purpose. You know what it takes in the off season, or I'll go into the range dropping bombs, how to perfect your craft. You got to work well with others, man. How do you become the best teammate that you can? What happens when you overcome obstacles? All that stuff from a culture standpoint was an easy transition for me. But what struck me for the identity piece was when I had a crisis of belief in my faith. When I came across an obstacle that I couldn't overcome by my own work ethic, by my own intellect, by my own ability, that's where I really became and struggled with and found out my true identity. And this is all part of my testimony, guys, as my son Chase, after we won our third Super Bowl, got really sick. Long story short, he ended up getting an autoimmune illness from a reaction to one of the childhood immunizations. And we didn't know whether he was going to make it. And this was the only time, doctors didn't have any answers. I mean, what do you mean? Fix it, doc, fix it. We live in America. We're not supposed to be dealing with these types of issues. And from my point, again, it was the only time that, I was one of the strongest guys in the Cowboys. I could bench 550 pounds. I've squatted 750. I'm running a 4.740 at 290 pounds. I've been a fighter pilot. I've flown missions in combat. I've done all these different things, but I couldn't fix my son. And for me, that was like, God, who are you? Who am I? Who'd you create me to be? There's got to be more to life than just getting out, trying to achieve and accomplish all these goals. Who am I in the pursuit of those? And that is where my faith grew stronger. My relationship with my wife grew stronger. I mean, we were intentional about that aspect of identity and purpose. Who are, and I can, for me, if you had to say something like living excellence, everybody goes out, let's live excellence. What is it? And for me, it's simple. It's having a strong identity, sense of purpose, and then living each day to be your best self. I mean, you may not bring your A game every day, but you can get up and you can be your best self that day. To me, that's living excellence. It doesn't matter what you do. If you do and follow that philosophy, for me, that's living excellence. So, man, hopefully I brought that
Fantastic.
for you.
Hey, I know you're running a program called wingman.org, and you're helping vets with mental health, but you're also helping them with this identity piece. Like, can you tell us more about what the Wingman
Yeah,
organization is all about?
what I did. Wingman is a men's a discipleship ministry where we encourage guys to get into small groups, discipleship, and to just bear those, to walk through life together. And I kind of draw an analogy that as a fighter pilot, if I'd fly a training mission or a combat mission, I'd never go solo. You'd always go with another wingman, right? And if you didn't take care of your wingman and your wingman didn't take care of you, the likelihood of you accomplishing your mission way down, likelihood of something bad happening goes way up. Same thing with just military individuals who are suffering through post-traumatic stress. They talk about the number one modality of treatment is to just get with somebody, a buddy or whatever, and kind of talk things through, not fix it, but just help process what the experience was, what the mission was in that, and to somebody that can lead an empathetic ear. And I translate that from, man, we have a lot of men who are walking wounded that didn't necessarily serve in the military, but that had, some horrific things that happened to them as young men, as young boys, or, things that we did to ourselves. It's how do you get them to process through that? And that's kind of what the whole mission is about. It's to accept, affirm, and hold each other accountable is the mantra that we go through. And it's the Vegas principle. What's said here stays here.
Yeah,
And it's just an encouraging guide to be men, to be the husband, to be the father, to be, the men of God that he's calling each and every one of us to be.
love that.
Not to be a spectator, but to get off the bench, man, and get into the game. And this is the thing, is that so many times men, today, or individuals, they complain about culture. They complain about, our world's going to hell in a handbasket. And my first question to them is, okay, what are you doing about it? You're complaining. How many young men are you mentoring? I mean, aside from your sons, I mean, reaching out, how many of your peer group are you encouraging, to take up the sword, this sword of the spirit, God's word, and go out and let's do battle. And it's, guys, that's what that Great Commission is all about. Go and make disciples. And that's kind of what Wingman's about, or the philosophy behind Wingman.
Yeah, I love that. And that resonates. Stu and I are often telling, I mean, that's what we preach. We're like, hey, don't be a sideline dad, don't be a sideline Christian, don't be a sideline, you name it, right? Like be a kinetic man, like be somebody, a man who does something about the things you talk about, because otherwise, I mean, talk is cheap, right? We can all talk. It's just it takes those special individuals who are willing to action it. So I love that. And one of the things you said, and I'm curious, you've talked about in the past the dynamic, and I think you talked about it from a leadership perspective of specifically head coaching, but the dynamic of the team, specifically the Cowboys, went, a change in coach, a change at the head led to a different team identity. And what you just said also resonated with me, that we have the ability to choose. It's not just about our personal identities. We have the ability to choose the identity of the team that we create, that we surround ourselves with, those individuals who we choose to associate with. And if you don't mind just talking uh, through the context of making a choice of who we surround ourselves with, and the power that we have in choosing that, and the impact it has not only on our lives but those around us, because of the people we choose to spend our time with, right? I don't have to hang out with Stu, but a lot of us feel like, well, this is my neighborhood, this is my team, this is whatever, I have to hang out with these people, and it's just it is where I'm at. Well, no, we can choose exactly where we want to be. and we can be intentional in that. And wingman strikes me very much like, hey, let's create this environment, this team with an identity that is XYZ, right? Is to pursue excellence, living excellence, is to pursue becoming better men. If you don't mind talking about that a little bit, and in the context that just out of pure curiosity, the context of what happens when that starts to shift, the focus, that identity starts to shift, particularly with the Cowboys.
Um, I love a quote by Machiavelli in The Prince. He said, "The best indication of any man's character is by the company in which he keeps. Your friends, your relationships, your mentors, they matter." And, and I always encourage young people, if your friends aren't edifying you, aren't lifting you up, aren't encouraging you to become a better person, you got to question that relationship. And I kind of nerd out on brain science and social psychology. And I'll just mention one of my favorite authors is a gentleman by the name of Jonathan Haidt, Heidt. He's a social psychologist out of NYU Stern Business School. He's written a lot of great books. And in 3 of his books, he pays reference to um, a pioneer sociologist, a guy named Emil Durkheim, who traveled all over Western Europe in the latter part of the 19th century, so 120 plus years ago. And this guy studied communities. And he found in communities where there wasn't a common moral foundation, a common identity, a common purpose, there was a decrease in happiness and an increase in suicide. Look around. Look around at our cultures.
We're in it.
People are unhappy, the anxiety, the depression, the suicide. Look at what is the number one demographic for suicide in our country today? I'm looking at it.
Man,
like myself, middle-aged men.
Yeah.
And that's it. Because a lot of times culture is beating them down, society's beating them down, toxic masculinity, this, that. You're being told that you don't matter, that people, whatever it may be. And that pulls apart the cohesiveness of that unit. And specifically speaking of the Cowboys, man, when I got to the Cowboys in '92, these guys had laid a great foundation. The year prior to that, 2 years prior to that, they went 1-15. I mean, the worst record in the NFL. Next year, they made it to the playoffs, right? And then the next year, win the Super Bowl in Jimmy's 3rd year that he's with the Cowboys, Coach Johnson's 3rd year. It was a sense that leadership Jimmy ruled was very Orwellian in his leadership style, very micromanager, ruled by fear. And I say Orwellian in the fact, like Animal Farm, all animals are created equal, some are more equal than others. But he knew the strings to push and the buttons to push. But, that type of leadership style, it's like the guys, okay, we're in the middle of combat. And we got to take that hill and we got to get it done now. And we're taking casualties, but keep on pressing on. He was kind of like that battlefield commander. But when you get to the top, we won a Super Bowl. Now what? How do you continue to repeat? Everybody's been there through that. You don't necessarily need that battlefield commander at that point in time. It's how do we maintain it? How do you kind of have that good manager that's going to maintain it? Well, we won our 2nd Super Bowl with Jimmy, and then he and Jerry have their falling out, and Barry Switzer comes in. I love Barry Switzer, but a totally different dynamic leader where individuals that were used to this micromanagement style. Now it's very laissez-faire, hands off. You're a grown man, do whatever you want to do, just be on time for the bus and do what's expected to be in practice and in the game. So when guys are used to that one type of leadership style, you pull the cork off the powder keg, boom, everything blew up. Everybody started to, have their own agendas. I want to make my money for this next contract. I'm just want to get my own statistics. The team concept, those first couple of years, I've never been around a group of more selfless individuals. And I'm talking 7 Hall of Famers that are from that team. That guys, they wanted to do, it was all about not just winning games, but winning Super Bowls. And, we end up winning one more with Barry, but ultimately that dynamic, that core sense of identity, that core purpose, you know, it used to mean something when you put that star in your helmet. You did the work and you were expected to perform with excellence. The kind of individuals came in, started to pour apart the fabric, and that's what eventually led ultimately to the downfall, in my opinion, of that dynasty. It's so different. I would contend it was easier to climb that ladder of success to be that Super Bowl champion the first time than it was most certainly to try and win it, two in a row, three in a row, four in a row. Man, that's why it's so difficult, and that's why it hasn't been done very often. When teams are able to repeat year after year after year, that's something special.
Yeah, it's and I think it also it indicates that when we are choosing, you have to reassess. Stu and I had a conversation recently. Is it okay to leave groups, right? Is it okay to leave friend groups behind, right? And I say that, and you don't mean it like leave them behind. You always invite them into what you're pursuing next, but to your point, constantly seeking, understanding the change of dynamic, understanding, being self-aware enough, not only for yourself but for the team dynamic, for the group, to understand what's changing, and then to make a decision, right? Like, is this something that I want to be a part of? Is this something? I mean, this goes to everything, right? This even goes to a church dynamics. I was in a church, the head pastor left, and it just was fascinating to me how it caused me to question, hey, is this about Jesus or is this about the pastor? Like, what is this about? And digging in and understanding those dynamics, and then ultimately making choices. Hey, I need to find something. I need to be surrounded by something different. I need to be identified not only as an individual, but you said that individual identity also drives that daily excellence, because I know who I am. So therefore I can seek out those that I want to be with, be like, and who drive you to that next level. So I love that. It's just a fascinating study that you got to not only live, but you to observe, and also to dissect and understand where to drive forward from there.
Yeah, and I can give you a kind of a sports metaphor that I always try to find truth in all aspects. And if it's truth, truth is truth is truth, no matter what situation, no matter who it applies to, truth is truth. And I kind of came up with this metaphor of athletics, that when young men are in their teens and their 20s, they're like that freshman on the team, or they're like that rookie. They're trying to figure out the offense, the defense. They're trying to figure out, they're trying to make the team first and foremost. They're trying to figure out how they fit into the scheme. And that translates into the world. Get your education, go out there and perform. Expect it to perform. Put in the long hours, bust your butt, set high goals, figure out that aspect of what your pursuits are. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Then when you get in your 30s and your 40s, you're kind of like that vested veteran. You're that upperclassman. You're the captain of the team. You've been there. You've had the success. The offense, defense, whatever. Your role well, but you realize that for the team to have success, I have to start lifting up others. So you become that kind of that player coach. Translates, in the civilian world, you're that manager. You're that director. Now you start filling out and seeding other people's lives, feeding them and who they are, teaching those young guys what it means to be a part of this organization, this team, this whatever. And then when you're my age, you get in your 50s and your 60s, you're approaching retirement. You've been there, done that with everything that you've done. Now what it is, it's all about mentorship. You're that wise man, hopefully that wise man, sitting at the city gate from a biblical perspective, where it's all about sharing life examples and giving back to others, and elevating the whole team. And it's not about you. And it's because I don't expect a young guy that's just starting off in his career to have the same wisdom, knowledge, and drive where I'm at my stage of life. We're totally different. But that metaphor, hopefully it resonates with you guys, is, it kind of is. There's phases of life that we go through where we have the same identity, but how we execute that is different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. Hey, I'm curious. I want to hear about your faith journey a little bit. You had You wrote a book called The Rules of Engagement: Finding Faith and Purpose in a Disconnected World. And you had mentioned, the challenges you had with your son and him, going through this challenging time of sickness. And have you always been a believer? Have you always, walked with Jesus? And were there challenges in that identity, finding your identity in Jesus? And was it challenging at the Cowboys level to like walk and tell people that you're a believer? I'm curious about this journey that you were on.
I grew up in the church. I grew up as a believer. Did the Sunday school, did confirmation classes, did the whole thing, and I believed. But I would say like the relationship piece and the nature and character of God didn't become real to me until I had this crisis of faith with my son. That's where you come to those crossroads where it had to cost me something. It's like what Bonhoeffer talks about in the cost of discipleship: cheap grace versus costly grace. I don't wish trial and turmoil and struggle on anyone, but it's during those times is where we hone our faith, and we define who we are and find out who we are as individuals. Faith is a muscle, man. If you don't use it, you lose it, man. And if it's like anything that you got to get out there and you have to stretch it. And there's so many biblical examples with that. And regarding the Cowboys, for me, just in life, you don't have to be a Bible thumper, man. And this is the thing that I've learned about kids today, that these kids grew up playing video games. They're so adept to absorbing so much content and information to kind of sift through. And what do I need to find out about this individual game? Cut through all the minutia and get right to the heart of how do I proceed. And that's kind of they have that radar up, that they can still see you as an individual. That if you're telling me to do something, I mean, are you full of it, or are you sincere? Do you have the gravitas, the ethos, the pathos, the logos? But why should I believe what you're telling me? And this is why I encourage people: you got to walk the walk. It's not just talk the talk. Does your life bear the fruit of what you're professing? So to get back to that locker room, I never had to be people knew just the way how I conducted myself. And people today, I don't have to walk up when somebody comes up to me in business, hey, you're a Christian, I'm a Christian, I want to tell you about. I'm like, man, hold on, because they're the guys that I probably don't trust the most. It's like, don't just tell me, show me. And that to me is, I learned that lesson, and I think that's one of the best lessons I've learned in life is, yeah, you got to tell me who your name is, but I'm going to show you who I am by my deeds and my actions.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me that the stuff that sticks. We came home last night from a 4-day float trip, no devices, and there were multiple families there. And conversations between kids that I did not witness. And my son he's like, man, Dad, these kids don't believe in Jesus. He believes in like the Greek gods. And I was like, oh, interesting. Because kids pick up things from their parents. And I said, well, what do you feel about that? Like, how do you feel about that? And what's fascinating is the kids see me reading the Bible every morning. It's out, but it's not something that, well, I did recently. They went to church camp, came back singing the Fruits of the Spirit song. And I did say, hey guys, tell me the fruits of the Spirit and show me one of those fruits being manifest in the way you're treating each other. So I did use the Bible a little to beat them down, but all joking aside, it was interesting to me how much my son is diving in. Like I walked into his room, he's 11, he's a boy, he's immature, but he had his Bible open, he's reading it, and in the context of this conversation he had with some other kid, and it really made me think about, and what you said earlier about this passion that you have now for mentorship. Man, if you're not living it, you're just like, hey, go read your Bible, buddy, because it's good for you. Like there's not, and if there's nothing manifesting in my life like that, it rings hollow and it's cheap. But what you're talking about pouring into these future generations, in that context, I'm curious, what is it? Tell us a little bit about this passion that you have, this heart that you have, and what it is you're doing to really counter the idea of, man, culture is garbage. I'm going to sit on the couch and just observe it, not doing about it. That's clearly not you. What are the things that we can practically be doing and that you're doing to shape and to pour in some of the I'll tell you, this changed my life. I was listening to it. You said my living legacy. Since I listened to you say that, I've really been meditating on, dude, really don't care about my afterlife legacy. What is my living legacy? And so what is it that you're doing right now to really emphasize living a legacy to pour into the future generations?
You know, every Christian wants to hear in the parable of the talents, are you 1, 2, or 5 talent individual? And they want to hear those words, well done, good and faithful servant, when it's all said and done. And I thought years ago, thinking from a worldly perspective, what does that look like? It means I got to be doing all these things, and I got to be in the worldly philosophy. I need to speak to all these different groups, go to these men conferences and speak, serve on this board, and make sure I do this. So it's a lot of these what I would classify big, extravagant things, but yet I had kind of an epiphany. I said, like the widow with the mites when she gave all she had. So what's most important with God in God's economy? Is it, yeah, there's some importance to speaking to all these groups of men, but where do I move the needle more in the kingdom of heaven? And I said, it's having those one-on-one sessions with a young man, whether my son, my godson, my son-in-law, other young men that I'm mentoring. That to me moves the needle more. So I've really concentrated. So for me, I will walk guys through. It's a 20-week program of I take Dr. Gene Getz's Measure of a Man, where he talks about where Paul talks to Timothy and Titus. These are different traits of leadership in the church, and I just walk through and have these conversations. And it's you kind of, David, you hit a chord with me that resonated when you tell kids, go read your Bible. And it's one thing too, where they see you doing it, but here's a big difference in discipleship. Grab somebody, young man's hand, hey, come with me, let's do this together. Let's walk through this life together. Follow me as I follow Jesus, but I'm going to actively demonstrate. So let's go through this content. I'll be transparent. You be transparent. We'll walk through this. So I do that. And then, biblical literacy sometimes is not where it should be with, young people, because most individuals, men, when they go to church, they're spectators. They go listen to a good sermon, sing a few worship songs, square filled, right? Fill that box. But actual getting to a Bible study, biblical literacy. So I take all these young guys, and I'll back up here. My rules of engagement with these young guys is, okay, if I take you through that, there's going to be a commitment on your part. If I take you through this program, you're going to have to go find someone else, and you're going to continue to do this for the rest of your life. And then whoever you find, you're going to tell them the same rules of engagement. They're going to have to go find their guy. And I call it like biblical multi-level marketing or direct sales. You get your two and they get their two, they get their two. That's
it's a legal pyramid scheme. It's an encouraged pyramid scheme.
Scheme.
God promotes that pyramid scheme.
Yeah. And that's what I do with these young guys. I said, okay. And for those guys that are going through it, then we get together every couple of weeks and we go through an in-depth Bible study where we look at the Greek, the Hebrew, and I try to walk them through to increase their biblical literacy. So that's what I'm doing for myself now, as I'm trying to finish strong with that. That's what I'm doing. So anybody could do it. Grab content. There's all kinds of discipleship content out there. I mean, there's a plethora of it. Grab something that you like, you enjoy, and it's just something to start conversations with whoever that you take through. And it's a mindset, and it's a commitment, because it's a lifestyle change.
Yeah, that's encouraging. I love it. Hey, you said in your book, you said the importance of masculine relationships is diminished. Why do you think that is? And do you think it's still true today?
I think the biggest, we come through this COVID craziness of isolation, right? And I think the biggest pandemic that we are facing with men today is isolation. Men don't have relationships. The advent of technology, you can sit in your downstairs in your parents' basement, play video games, look at porn, and never leave. Why? What's your motivation to really get off the bench, and to do anything? And I think that's where, um, today as parents, Jonathan Haidt, again, the guy I mentioned before, has another book out that it's in the queue for me to read. It's called The Anxious Generation.
Fantastic book.
Yeah, have you read that?
I have, yeah. It's
Man.
kind of scary.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I've read a lot of his other stuff, that he refers to, but we got to get this. We're doing this via Zoom, but you got to get the
in
face to
person.
face. And I mean, there's your brain has impulses and there's hormonal release when you can look into somebody's facial expressions and read that. We need that intimacy. So we are in a crisis where men don't know how to do it. Men just don't, because it's not being modeled, and because everybody's on their streaming Xbox, and you're talking to some guy that may be all over in a far distant country, but it's not face to face. So we got to kind of back up, separate. I love where you separate, go on a float trip, where you got to do that periodically with your wingman, with your guys, is just get away and concentrate on the relationship at hand. We need that to survive, guys. We need those biblical, masculine, strong relationships where we accept the firm and we hold each other accountable.
I love that.
Amen.
And one thing that, I want to encourage all our listeners to do is you don't have to go on a 4-day float trip. I highly recommend it, but you don't have to go on a 4-day float trip. What you can do, something as simple as when you meet somebody for coffee, you both commit to turning your phones off. Like something that simple, right? Like just a little thing that we do and we make habitual when we engage with our kids, when we engage with, there's nothing more distracting than if I'm doing this podcast and I take no, I oftentimes show my pen so that the person on the other end of the screen knows that I'm taking notes, not on my cell phone on the other side, right? Like that I'm not texting, that I'm not disengaged. Because even if, Stu and I would joke all the time, but if one of us were in a conversation, one of us kind of looks at our phone, would just be like, "Hey, I'll wait till you're done." Like, dude, that is a very, very effective, like, hey, I'm right here. This is important to me. You're important to me. Your intention is important to me. So I'll just wait till you're done. But I think if we were more conscious with just being where we're at, and I love what you said, Chad, about I pour into these one-on-one because I think I'm moving the needle in heaven. Like it's so lost in how critical, I think how critical the normal life is. It's exceptional to be able to speak to crowds of people, and it's a beautiful thing. But sometimes we lose the power of the normalcy of, hey, just one-on-one time. And you'd never know that investment that could get somebody, that could get someone on the path of Jesus. And then that person's like, dude, I love Jesus. It's because I had this conversation that person will never know about. Now I want to share this Jesus. And it just really, I mean, that's how Jesus did it, right? Like he took his 12, he took his homies, and like he was pouring into these guys and these women constantly. And it was more of an exception to speak and feed the 4,000 and the 5,000. Like that was more the exception than it was the time that they just spent together on float trips, catching fish, whatever they were doing. It was so powerful. And so I love how you highlight that. And I appreciate you, giving permission to just to be normal and to invest, right? Because I think it's shocking, but being normal is quite abnormal now. Having those deep relationships and the one-on-ones is just, it's just not normal. We'd rather be YouTube influencers. And I think for Stu and I, our dream is that we take this show on the road and we're like, hey, Chad, we'd love to do a podcast. We'll be in Texas or come to Colorado. Let's do this in person. Different dynamic, right?
You bet. Awesome.
Hey, Chad, I got one last question for you. This is a really serious question here.
Yeah, it's not. I can already
Are,
tell you this is going to be a garbage question. We might have to edit it out.
how the Cowboys going to do this year? How are they going to be? They get got Super Bowl in the
No,
horizon?
I gave up on prognosticating as to what the boys are going to do year after year. When I think they're good, they're terrible. When I think they're not going to be any good, they do all right. But it's, the sad thing is it's been since, 96, 28 years since we played in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That's unheard of. They're young kids. I see all the time, that they were when they were born, the Cowboys haven't been good since they've been born, for the last 20, whatever, 8 years. So anybody that's under, 32 that has a memory that can remember that, it's been that long, and that's unheard of for the number one sports franchise in the world. I mean, from a monetary, what they're worth.
Right.
It's frustrating. I mean, believe me, we as alumni, as former Cowboy players get together and we commiserate all the time.
I bet. Well, Chad, this has been a fun conversation. I really appreciate you guys coming on the show. And where can we send people to learn more about everything that you're doing, from your books to your speaking to wingman, everything that you're doing? What do we put in the show notes?
It's easy. You can just go to my website, chadhennings.com.
Perfect. Well, I'm gonna steal David's line and just tell you that you're doing amazing work, and you're not gonna know the true impact you have until you get to heaven. And there's a line at the gate, saying thank you to the impact that you've made, and you hear those words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Guys and gals, hey, go check out chadhenning.com. We'll put him in the show notes. He's got 3 amazing books. He's running in some really cool organizations. Yeah, Chad, thanks. See ya.
Cheers.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you for listening to the Connect Man podcast. If you are growth-minded, community-focused, and willing to take uncommon action to redefine success and live an abundant life, visit our website at www.thekineticman.com to see all the ways we can connect.
And on our website, you can find more information on everything we're doing, like joining our meetup page to get the details on our webinars and our local Thursday gatherings here in Colorado. From our site, you can also find more information on and sign up for the next Kinetic Man retreat and the next house of our mastermind group. Finally, we always appreciate your love and support. Please share this episode and go rate us on your favorite podcast player of choice.
Thank you again. Now go take uncommon action.